Baleen whales, such as humpbacks and blue whales, are a type of whale that sieve mountains of krill from the water in a single gulp. With that much going in one end, there must be a fair bit coming out the other.
It's pretty big. If you see photographs of these animals actually releasing a trail of feces, it can be tens of meters long. Quite how much is in an individual defecation is very difficult to say because no one's actually gone behind them and measured the volume of poo coming out of the bag of a whale.
Scientists suspect that, like cows in a paddock, whales fertilise the ocean with their manure. The more marine plants grow, the more carbon dioxide the ocean absorbs.
The Southern Ocean is extremely important for taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's known as a CO2 or carbon sink. Anything that controls the amount of production, which leads to carbon taken out of the atmosphere, is one of those natural processes that up until recently we didn't know how effective it was.
With every scientific expedition to the Southern Ocean comes more evidence of its fundamental importance to the planet's carbon cycle. Now it turns out that whales may have more to do with it than anyone expected.
But the story starts with something much smaller, right down at the base of the food chain. Meet the phytoplankton. Teeming in their countless trillions, these microscopic organisms quietly shift megatons of carbon from the atmosphere into the ocean.
Plants in the ocean take up the carbon dioxide, and when they die, they sink out of the surface layer and take that carbon dioxide out of circulation.
Throughout the world's oceans, phytoplankton blooms are visible from space. All it takes is a bit of fertiliser, macronutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, and micronutrients like iron. But the Southern Ocean is different. There are plenty of nutrients, but there's hardly any iron.
Normally, dust would be a very major contributor to the ocean, and in dust you have a high concentration of iron, but because the whole of Antarctica is covered by ice, it just locks it all down.
On the sea ice, 75 kilometres off the coast of Antarctica, marine chemists Pierre and Delphine use a stainless steel corer to see what iron they can find.
We usually take some sea ice, but look also at the water column below and the snow above, so that we have all the different sources of iron.
To grow, most species of phytoplankton need at least 1 nanogram of iron per tonne of water. They're trying to detect just 1 paperclip's worth in 200,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools of seawater.
That can give us information on primary production, how much production there is in the water. So the more iron there is, the more production there's going to be.
Ever since people discovered that iron was in such short supply, the idea was, well, if you put more iron into the Southern Ocean, it should become more fertile. In the ocean, gravity is the big enemy because things tend to drop out of the surface layer, which is the sun layer, which is where the plants grow. So if you can find a way to keep iron in the surface layer, then the surface layer could become more productive.
Grazing on the phytoplankton are swarms of krill, the perfect mobile concentrators of iron.
They retain a large portion of the iron in their bodies in the surface waters right throughout the year.
In fact, the Antarctic krill population contains a quarter of the total iron in the surface waters of the Southern Ocean. Which begs the question, what role for the baleen whales that eat the krill?
The theory was you have this cycle whereby there's very little iron in the water, the phytoplankton scavenge that iron out, the krill eat it and concentrate it very highly, the whales eat that and then return the iron to the seawater. The whole theory that whales can assist with the fertilization of the Southern Ocean depends on there being a lot of iron in the feces. Now, no one had actually measured that up until now.
But first, you have to collect your samples, and that takes a long-handled net and a bit of luck. This is rare footage of a blue whale defecating.
Oh, there's a poo! We don't get that. Yeah.
Researchers in the right place at the right time send their samples to the Australian Antarctic Division.
You want to see a whale poo in all its glory? Well, this is about as much as you can get with a long-handled net. But what it might lack in size, it certainly makes up for in aroma, a rich tangy smell of an oily fish sauce.
Pierre and Delphine are up to their pipettes in poo, hoping to hit pay dirt. The samples are broken down with strong acids to digest all the different ingredients. What's left is analysed with a state-of-the-art spectrometer.
This is an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer, and in this technique we have a very hot gaseous cloud that's as hot as the sun. We're pumping samples into this hot plasma, and it's a bit like a chemical sledgehammer.
By breaking things down to their atoms, it's able to measure in the range of parts per billion.
So that's probably about 0.1 or 0.2 part per billion there. So there's no iron in that sample at the moment.
So the sample should come through any second.
Ah,
Oh,
look
there
at
it
that.
is.
Look at that.
Amazing.
That's fantastic. That's unequivocally iron.
We found that the feces of whales contain a very large amount of iron, about 10 million times that that you find in the background level of seawater. That's a huge amount of iron. So that's something that gives credence to the hypothesis that it really should be a fertilizing agent of the seawater.
It's the first step to figuring out how much productivity is stimulated by whales, and by extension, their contribution to storing carbon by fertilising phytoplankton with their iron-rich feces.
If it just sinks down to the water, then it's useless.
Need
So
to find out whether it's tasty for the phytoplankton or not,
basically,
whether they like to eat it.
So that's going to be the next step for us, I think, just to look at how available it is for phytoplankton.
It helps to explain how the Southern Ocean worked when whales were in much greater abundance than they are now.
What we've managed to show is a possible mechanism for how you could have had both more whales, more krill, and more phytoplankton.
And in a world that plans to harvest more krill, that depends on the Southern Ocean to store our carbon emissions, and that wants to restore and protect the populations of whales, it's a vision of a healthy, productive ecosystem we really can't live without.